Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to another YouTube video. Hypsudo here, bringing you guys the latest in Dragonheir. And I'm here at the end of Season 2, fighting this new boss, the Mekkatorque. He's the final boss of Season 2. And I want to make a video guide, a full video guide about the mechanics and the boss, and basically give you guys advice on how to get better scores on this boss. I've been doing this boss now for a couple weeks. Firstly, below 50% when the boss was easy, and now for a few days after the boss hit 50% HP, when the boss gets harder and some new mechanics get added, and I kind of had to rework all my teams a bit, but I'm once again getting very good damage, averaging 1.2 billion per day now, after fixing up my teams and doing a bunch of tweaks. But basically, I've averaged around 1.2 or 1 to 1.2 billion per day for the days I've had on the boss. And so, I'm doing pretty well for myself. I was ranked 6 at the end of last reset. I think some people have already done the boss for today, but I am, top 10. And I just want to go over what I've learned. So hopefully this can be a guide and help you. So I want to go through some points here, from start to finish. I'm trying to keep it short and concise. So we're going to start off by covering the boss mechanics. So the first things I want to cover are the unique debuffs. This is one of the features that allows you to do a lot more damage. So basically, for every unique debuff you apply to the boss, you gain 10% more damage. He gains a stack of misstep, which then results in you dealing 10% more damage. So you want as many unique debuffs as possible. Now, you only have to apply those debuffs once. So you can build someone with lower accuracy, have them just get lucky, apply the debuff once, and then it'll permanently be on the boss, increasing your damage by 10% for the rest of the fight. But only unique debuffs counts. So attack penalty 1, attack penalty 2, those are each attack penalty debuffs, but they're also different versions, so they also are counted as unique debuffs. So the same thing can be applied with defense penalty artifacts. I'm going to load in a team here and show you what I mean. So the Crown is defense penalty 1, and the Witch's Remains is defense penalty 2. Although they're both defense penalty, these are both unique debuffs. Elminster here, he's bringing also 2 debuffs, accuracy penalty, attack penalty. Burn is another debuff I'm bringing along. So this team, and recharge speed penalty from Zarloth. So this team ends up having 6 debuffs, increasing my damage by 60% once I've got all those debuffs to land on the boss. Now with all the lower tier debuffs like defense penalty 1 and attack penalty 1, accuracy penalty 1, those debuffs cannot overwrite the higher versions. So you want to make sure you use those at least on the first turn. If you're going to manual your guys on the first turn, use those before the higher version gets applied so that you can guaranteed land them. And then once they stick on the boss, you no longer have to do them early. You can then do them after the higher tier. Next, I want to cover some control that can be used on this boss. So this boss can be weakened by charms, fears, and blinds. Whenever you land that on the boss, or the minions, which I guess I explain that next. So I'll explain this first, actually. The boss, when you deal debuffs to the boss on the minions, which I guess this boss, for some reason, they're called magical crystal projectiles. The debuffs you apply on the boss also get, or on the minions also get applied on the boss. So if you put attack penalty on a minion, it'll get applied on the boss. If you put the blind on a minion, it'll get applied on the boss. So basically, you can have abilities be targeted only on the minions, whether it's the battle skill. For example, Zarloth does an AoE battle skill. This is always going to go for the minions because it hits the most targets when it goes on the minions. And let me cover the minions real quick so you guys know what I'm talking about. So the boss has this first ability that is going to summon minions here on the right side. It's going to summon 6 total minions right here. And so we're talking about these guys right now. So applying debuffs to them will also apply debuffs to the boss. So you can have your unique debuffs, which is going to make you do more damage to the boss. You can apply them to either the boss or the minions. Doesn't matter. It's all going to end up on the boss. And the same thing with the charm, the fear, and the blind. And these controls will give a stack of thwarted transmission, which basically acts as a pseudo attack penalty, reducing the boss's damage by 30%. And these can stack. So if you're landing multiple fears and charms and blinds, you can get multiple stacks. If you get 4 stacks, the boss does 0 damage because, 30% times 4 is, over 100%. So you could reduce the boss's damage to 0 if you do that much. But that's very hard to do. There's not many characters that do blind, fear, and charm in the game. So you'll likely only have maybe 1, maybe 2 if you're lucky on a team. So this team is just using one person who can do a fear, Zarloth, to help mitigate us a little bit of damage. So it's acting as like sort of another attack penalty for this team. But yeah, those are the two debuff mechanics that you're landing on the boss, both unique debuffs and the controls. And the next thing I want to cover is the damage reduced starting from the left. So basically, this boss has an ability which he swipes the screen from left to right. And it reduces the subsequent damage by 10% for each target's hit. So basically, he'll start swiping from left to right. Once he hits Elminster, he's going to do 10% less damage to Thea and Biggs, and then 10% less to Rossi's, and continuing in that fashion. So the first person hit will take the most, and then the furthest person on the right will take the least. So that's another thing. You want to put your tanks and your tankier supports on the left, and try to put your squishier characters, your main DPS and stuff, on the right if you can. Now, you can't actually put anyone here because they will get pushed when the minions get summoned, and I'll explain that next when I get to the positioning section of this guide. But next we're going to cover the recharge speed penalty. So these minions, when they are spawned, if you do not kill them, if you do not reduce their HP to 0, they will shoot a laser in a horizontal line across the lane that they're in, which inflicts your team with a recharge speed penalty. So you want to try and kill all these minions if you can, or else you will have a chance to get recharge speed penalty. So this team, for example, we are able to get all these minions, except this last one in the back, to 0 HP, which prevents us from getting that recharge speed penalty. That is described here in this ability. So once the projectile reaches 1 HP, which is the name of those minions, it gains core damage, and then the projectile launches a laser or set interval dealing damage to enemies within the line, additionally inflicting a recharge speed penalty on the target if the projectile is not under core damage. So to make the projectile have core damage, you need to reduce it to 1 HP. If you don't, it'll do the recharge speed penalty in that horizontal line of its, in the lane it's in. So one thing you can do to avoid getting this recharge speed penalty, so for an example, if I put my Zarloth here, and I'm unable to make that one orb that spawns here have 0 HP, it'll then put recharge speed penalty on him, which is going to reduce how often he can ult. Which I guess I'll explain later, doesn't really matter, but for some teams it will matter. It'll slow you down, you won't be able to ult as often, it'll lose you damage. And you just don't want to have that extra debuff on you if you can avoid it. So there's a thing you can do with positioning on this boss, where if you put someone intentionally in a spot where the orbs will spawn, and then you put another ranged character just to where they would get pushed, they will then bug out and go be put in the front, because they cannot be put on top of a target that is already standing there. So you'll see what happens here. I'm basically abusing the fact that Zarloth gets pushed by the minions on top of Biggs, and then because he cannot be on the same tile as Biggs, he then gets forced to the front. So he ends up in the front here next to a Rossi's. So this is a way you can prevent someone from being in that back row if you don't want them to get recharge speed penalty, because in most teams where you're doing a damaging ability in a diamond, if you're using your team on auto, you will hit the boss and these 5 minions that are on these 4 tiles and this last tile, but this one in the corner here will not get hit, and so it will not get damaged and it won't get reduced to 1 HP. So it'll always shoot that recharge speed penalty across the lane, and so if you have anyone in the back row, they're going to get that. So this is one kind of tricky way you can avoid that, is by forcing your characters to the front. And you can do this with multiple range characters. I'm just doing it with one here. But if you had another ranged character here, and Thea's kind of already taking up that spot, he'll get pushed on top of Thea, and then because he can't be on the same tile, he will get then pushed into the front. If you're doing it with multiple ranged characters, one will go here and one will go here, likely. If you have a melee here, then maybe they'll go here and here, but basically they'll just get pushed into the front row. But yeah, that's how you can abuse that mechanic to avoid the recharge speed penalty on the back row. Next thing is attack penalty and stun. So once the boss reaches 50% HP, this is not relevant to you guys who are still fighting it on day 1, but once it reaches 50% HP, the first ability that the boss does will then apply an attack penalty on you, and the second ability will apply a stun on you. So once you get to 50%, you're going to want to have someone with some kind of debuff immunity or cleansing to help you avoid that attack penalty. That attack penalty is going to reduce the damage you do by a significant amount and going to help hurt you from getting to the full 200 million. And the stun also is going to hurt you if you were planning on using anyone every 15 seconds. It's going to prevent you from being able to do that. For example, Thea, she has a very low cooldown, and I also have, some skill haste and stuff reducing it. So she's able to ult every 14.5. I could technically have her ult every 15. This boss has a 30-second total turn. So if I want her to ult at a very specific time to give me that debuff immunity, but then I want to get twice as much ults and get twice as many, invises and healing, then I want her to ult every 15. But to do that, I need to avoid getting stunned, because if she gets stunned, she can no longer ult every 15. So in that case, I'm using a character who has control immunity, and I have just enough skill haste with the hourglass and some skill haste on the runes so that he's able to do that battle skill right before we are getting stunned every turn, which is preventing anyone from getting stunned, and then Thea can always use her ultimate every 15 seconds. Now, the attack penalty, for some reason, only goes on ranged characters, so you don't have to worry about that going on your melees. If your main DPS are all melees, then you might not even care about having a cleanse or a debuff immunity. You might just let it play out. So I have a team like that with Drist and Trollgar being my main 2 DPS, and my Rava gets attack penalty, but I don't really care, because these two guys are doing all my damage and they're melee and they never get attack penalty. And so although this team doesn't have a cleanser or any debuff immunity, it doesn't really impact the score too much, and we're still able to get to the 200 million in the end. Next, I want to cover positioning. So I kind of already covered that whole pushing thing and how the boss does more damage from the left to the right. So how you want to put your tanks on the left and anyone who's squishy on the right. But also, you want to make sure that if you're using people like Elminster or Furbath or anyone who does kind of healing or shielding around them, or even Yurn, who's doing turn boost and defense up to allies next to him, or people like Azolde, that you're trying to force everyone next to them to get those full benefits. So any kind of character who's doing some kind of buff around them, make sure you can try and get all your allies around them, either through abusing this pushing mechanic or just putting them next to each other to begin with. But I think ideally you'd use the pushing mechanic, because then you can keep people out of the back row and get them in the front where they're never going to get recharge P penalty. Next, we could cover some gearing stuff. So the best gear set for damage dealers on this boss is surprisingly the Emperor set. This is a set that kind of got neglected all season and was mainly used for maybe arena, but in most scenarios against bosses, because the boss has so much attack, the damage bonus was very minimal unless you were using attack stacking and attack penalty as well at the same time. But on this boss, because these minions that the boss summons have no attack, it is always going to give you the maximum value of 50% more damage, and no set can compete with that. Even with the Inventor set fully stacked, it's only going to give you I think it's 32%. Hold on, let me double check that. I think the most it can ever give you is 32%. And a lot of the times you're not going to have 4 stacks. Yeah, it's 8% per stack. You're not going to have 4 stacks because you're only able to ult every 20 seconds, and in most cases you're going to time your team to be ulting every 30. So you're going to be doing ults a lot less often, and with only battle skills, it's very hard to get the 4 stacks. So the Emperor set ends up just being flat out the best DPS set to do damage on this boss, because most of the damage you're going to be wanting to do to the minions when they're out for 10 seconds. That's how almost all my teams get the 200 million, is by doing a bunch of AoE damage on the minions for the 10 seconds that they are out, because they only last for 10 seconds and then they despawn. So you want to make sure that's the window when you're doing all the damage. And so I guess I'll talk about some gearing that you might want to consider. So you probably want to have someone with the Ancestral set to mitigate damage. All the damage this boss does is AoE, and you don't really need a dedicated tank necessarily. You can use a support character who doesn't really do much damage, kind of like Elminster, for example, to just be your tank. You use the Ancestral set on him. I'm still getting some Enlightenment, but mainly I'm focusing on defense so that he can absorb that damage, and this set is giving us damage reduction on everyone. And then on your other supports that aren't doing too much damage, you can go for a healing set is nice. It's particularly good on her in this team because she's ulting so often, every 15 seconds. So she's able to do that little heal from the set bonus every 15 seconds. And then we have Biggs, who is basically my Witch's Remains applier, since he has a 5-hitting ultimate. He's in the Cyril set. He's doing debuffs on the passive, on the battle skill, and the ultimate, so he's able to keep the Cyril set attack bonus buff pretty much always up. So you want someone like that who has multiple debuffs, likely, probably if you can on the battle skill, because these are usually every 10 seconds, and that, you know, inherently will lead to a permanent uptime of the Cyril set bonus, which is going to boost your damage. And then lastly, on your main DPS, which for me, I have 2 here who are doing a lot of my damage. I have Zarloth and I have Arasis. I'm going the Emperor set for the maximum damage. And with Arasis is my very best gear. 100% crit rate, a bunch of crit damage, a bunch of attack. And I'm using what I would say is arguably the best DPS artifact for any rare or epic, especially when using the Emperor set. This gives 30% more attack to non-legendary characters, and that attack is scaled off your total attack, not just your base attack. So whatever your total attack is, 30% of that is then added on top. So this is a crazy, crazy powerful artifact for giving you a ton of attack, and it synergizes really well with the Emperor set. So if you have this artifact, if you got it from Famiander, this is probably going to be going on your main DPS on pretty much every single one of your teams. And it's still good on legendaries. It's not as good. It's still good on legendaries. 15% of your total attack is still a lot of attack. Okay, and so that's some gearing recommendations on some fundamentals that you can follow. Another thing that I guess I already mentioned with the gearing is that, you know, you want the crown and the witches. These are both unique debuffs that are going to add to your damage. And then I guess the next thing we can cover is some timing stuff. So for this boss, he's a 30-second turn, and the 2 hardest hitting abilities are his ultimate, which is at 30 seconds, and his first ability, which is at 10 seconds. So you want to have an attack penalty or a defense up for one of those 2 at the very least, ideally both, but that is not always going to be possible. With this team, I have an attack penalty with Elminster, and I'm timing him at 21, and there's a specific reason for that. The boss is going to hit us at 30 seconds. A 21-second timing for the attack penalty will still reach to that 30 seconds because it's a 10-second attack penalty. But that 21 seconds is also going to cover a couple other abilities. So you'll see here when he does his attack penalty, he's doing it, hold on, he's going to do it here in a second, right after we're done getting stunned. So the first round we get stunned, I can't avoid it. But here, he's doing attack penalty at 21, and watch, 1 ability there, 2 abilities there, and then finally, the third ability, the final ability, the boss's ult, also the attack penalty is still up. So the 21-second timing is a very good timing for covering 3 abilities with attack penalty. And you can also use like defense up or shields or something like that if you want for that timing. But I think if you have something like a shield, which only has a limited value, you probably want to use that at like 29 seconds right before the boss ult, so you can absorb all of the boss ult, because that ability has the highest chance of one-shotting you later in the rounds. So you want to be, you know, having the full shield value there at 29 seconds when you get hit. And then, like I said, if you can get someone to do an ult at either 9 seconds before the 10-second ability, or you can delay them and have them instead ulting at 39 or 39.5, I think is like the very last second you can do it, then they are going to be mitigating the damage the boss does on the very first skill. So for example, she is doing invisibility, which with her passive is giving us some damage reduction, which is helping us take less damage. And then also that debuff immunity, which, like I've said before, is preventing us from getting the attack penalty. Now, one thing to mention that I don't know if I've mentioned yet is the attack penalty does not get applied to melee heroes for some reason. Melee heroes are completely free of getting attack penalty on them, so don't worry about them. Just want the cleanse and the debuff immunity if you have it for your ranged characters. And then lastly, for some other timings, I think I covered the defensive and the cleanse and debuff stuff. So yeah, 30-second interval, but there is a way to do 15-second every turn. So if you have someone like Thea, who has a very low cooldown, you can do 15-second intervals. As long as she's not getting stunned, she'll be able to do that. And then with some other teams, I'll show you some other teams that I'm using this strategy, is like, for example, I'm using Vikuk in this team, and his job here is not only to cleanse the attack penalty, but also to just heal as often and as much as possible. So I want him, if I can get him to below 15 seconds, I want him ulting every 15, because that's twice as many heals. If I just time him to cleanse me every 30 seconds, you know, we're losing a full ult of healing every round. So I was able to put Hourglass on him, a bit of Skill Haste on him, and get him below 15 seconds. And then because I don't have any control immunity, I don't have Elminster in here, I actually decided to build some resistance. So I have a resistance body armor. I got some resistance on the gear here. You can maybe use a resistance rune if you still have those. I've accidentally sold all mine here at the end of the season because I didn't think I'd need them. But yeah, you use some resistance here to make sure he never gets stunned. And then he was able to ult every 15 seconds with the cooldown reduction that he has from Hourglass and the gear. So that's a way you can get more healing. You can do the same thing with people like Hixandra. Basically, any healer who you just want them ulting as often as possible to heal you as often as possible, like Hixandra and Vikuk, and there's some others. You could put Hourglass on them, put some resistance on them, and then get them to ult every 15 instead of every 30, and then you get double the value on your healing. Most of your DPS characters, you're going to be wanting to time them every 30 because you can't put Hourglass on all of them. You're going to want to put DPS artifacts on them. And then also, the biggest damage window on this boss is almost always when the minions are out. Like I said, the Emperor set is very good against them because they have no attack, so you're going to do a massive damage against the minions. And AoE damage, the damage dealt to the minions on this boss counts towards the final score. So AoE damage hitting these minions that the boss summons is going to add up to a lot of your damage. So all my teams are pretty much built around that. You apply Witch's Remains, and then you do a bunch of big AoE damage hits while the minions are out, and that is going to add up to the most damage possible. So for this team, Arasis is blowing up a bunch of burn stacks, but doing a ton of damage. On this team, Percante is, he has a bunch of electrocute stacks from Shinak Tan, and then he's gaining his, I think it's called Overwhelm or something, Overwhelm stacks, and then he's ulting all the minions when they have defense penalty and just doing a ton of damage. Here we have a bunch of poisons being put up with Durango, and then Jathalia is blowing them up, doing a ton of damage. Here we have Vidimir, who's actually one of the most broken characters on this boss because of the way his ultimate works, bouncing around and doing AoE damage each time it hits a target. So it ends up hitting like 21 times on the minions and doing an insane amount of damage. So all we got to do in this team is put up Frost for him, put up defense penalty for him, which my Usha is doing. I think I use Witch's Remains on her. And then have him follow up with his ult, and he's doing like 70% of this team's damage for the full 200 million. And again, people who bring a lot of debuffs, like I'm just using Pargu here for all the debuffs he brings. He doesn't do any damage. I have the Serial set on him. He's ulting before everyone else to give us that bonus. But he's literally just here to increase the damage we do on the boss because he brings 5 unique debuffs, which adds up to 50% more damage on the boss. I don't have those debuffs anywhere else. I guess I do have an attack penalty here and a recharge speed penalty there, but you could bring people like him, Ripicus, all the characters who have the 5 debuffs on kind of like an RNG slot machine, similar to like, here's another one, Stegamuffin. He has 5 different debuffs he can randomly apply in his auto attacks. These characters are all good. Even if they're not maintaining those debuffs on the boss, they are going to permanently increase the damage you do for the whole run once they land at least that debuff, that one unique debuff once. And then, yeah, I'm just, building around massive AoE damage dealers like Trollgar and Drist here. And then here, this is my worst team. It only gets 185, but we're building around Karf, doing a lot of the damage, and making sure that he is ulting as soon as the summons, or as soon as the minions spawn, because his burns take some time to do damage. So I have a little bit of skill haste on him, and he ends up being able to ult every at 11.1, which is giving enough time for the burns to then trigger. You'll see here when I do this run that the burns trigger at the very last second before the minions despawn, and it's giving me a lot more damage overall. Oh, we're playing the wrong team. Never mind. But you guys get the idea. Another thing I forgot to cover, which I guess I could cover now, is accuracy. So this boss recommends 230 accuracy. It should be here. The recommended accuracy is 230, and you get a bit of accuracy from your Psyche Core, and if your alliance was able to get all the world buffs from the other world, you should also be getting 40 from here. So you get 40 accuracy here, and you get another 50 from the Psyche Core, which for some reason I can't bring up here. There it is. So that's going to add up to 90 extra accuracy in total, and so if it's recommending you 320, you only really need 230 on your guys. You can always get a little bit more just to be safe. And then on characters who maybe you're not relying on any of their debuffs to help you, like they don't have an attack penalty, they just have a bunch of debuffs that are pretty much ineffective against the boss. They don't do anything. You can't use recharge speed penalty or slow this boss down. So those debuffs are all cosmetic. They're there just to increase your damage by adding more unique debuff stacks. Those debuffs, you don't need to have accuracy to land them more than once. You just need to land them one time. So for example, with Zarloth, he applies a recharge speed penalty, but that does not affect the boss. So we just need him to land it once. So we actually skimped out on accuracy a bit. We only have 170. It's still enough for him to land it at least once. But then once he's landed it once, we're good. We don't need him to land it consistently. It's just bringing us more damage. So for some of these characters, you won't need the full 230 accuracy. Only on the characters where you want them to be landing their debuffs every round, like, you know, damage debuffs like burn, electrocute, poison, or attack penalty, which is going to help your survivability. And then accuracy penalty actually I think can also help you because it can reduce the boss's chance to land stuns and attack penalty on you. You can maybe put some resistance and pair it with accuracy penalty and then be able to never get stunned or get attack penalty on you. That's a strategy you could use. And yeah, that's pretty much everything about the boss. I guess I could explain why I'm using certain timings. So the 21-second timing, I already went over for that. The timing on Zarloth. So Zarloth is doing a fear, and like I said, the fear, blind, and charm act as a pseudo attack penalty. So we want him to do this kind of late at 16.5, which his ult lasts for 5 seconds. So the last tick of his ultimate is going to happen at 21.5. So if that fear lasts for 5 seconds, but that buff that the boss gains, the thwarted whatever it is, lasts for 10 seconds, then that means if we apply that fear on the last tick of Zarloth's ult at 21.5, it's going to act as basically another 10-second attack penalty, not quite, 30% less damage taken, for the boss's ult. So that's another way to mitigate the damage. I probably should build more accuracy on him to try and land that more often, but pairing both the attack penalty and the fear together is going to really mitigate that damage on the boss's ult a lot. And then if I wanted to, I could time them a little differently to try and cover both the ult and the starting ability, because this first ability the boss does also hits really, really hard. But we are using the invis to try and get some damage reduction, and it's kind of hard to time Zarloth to give us the fear for that, because we want him doing damage on the minions as well. So 16.5 is the only timing that really worked for him to be giving us that damage and also the fear and the damage reduction. So that's basically the basics of this boss. This was one team that I thought was relatively budget. I was able to make, has the you know, the event character that a lot of people are probably going to get, and you know, basically all epics and rares after that, and then, you know, a few legendary artifacts. The witches is really, really important on this boss. This artifact increases your damage by a lot. If you don't have it, you're probably not gonna be able to get the 200 million on all your teams. It's gonna be very difficult. The hourglass, this is something that you might not need if you've got, like, if you've got him scrolled, if maybe you use the candle instead to reduce the battle skill cooldown a little bit, and then you get some skill haste on the runes. You could probably also get his cooldown on the battle skill to where it needs to be to give you that control immunity. So it's not really required. It's just I don't want to waste scrolls on him, so I'm just using this. And then, like I said already, this artifact for DPS. This artifact, this is literally just here to give him more attack. You could use the hero trophy if you got it last season. You could use playing cards. Whatever gives him a lot of attack is going to help him heal for more. And then with this team, I am using the attack aura on my normal runs to not only increase my healing, but increase my damage with the Emperor set and just overall more damage. And both Thea and Zarloth's heals scale off the attack. And so yeah, that's this team covered, and the basically the boss mechanics and everything. And I hope that helps you guys get some 200 million scores. It was a lot of work to improve my teams over the few days, especially after the boss hit 50%, having to rework the teams, and still managed to get 1.2 billion here after the boss got basically buffed and is much harder. So I think that's pretty good. I think that's something to aim for. I'm currently, I think, rank 6 or something like that, so I've done pretty well. And I think I've gotten a good idea on the mechanics of this fight, and hope this this guide can be helpful to you guys and help you guys improve your scores. Unfortunately, you can't see my score from yesterday because it won't show me it, but I was able to get 1.2 billion, which is about the peak that you can get with teams. Because I guess I never mentioned, when you do 200 million damage with a single team, the boss then thereafter takes 90% less damage. So 200 million should be your goal. Once you hit 200 million, you've pretty much reached the peak of what that team can achieve. Yes, you can get a bit more, 205, 210, You know, if you're a crazy whale, 250 maybe. But that's kind of the peak of what you should be aiming for. The 200 mark, hit that mark, and then save whatever score you get after. You know, anything on top of 200 is just icing on the cake. And if you can get all your teams to 200, you're doing amazing. I mean, that's probably not going to happen. Not everyone has, you know, accounts like this with a bunch of legendary artifacts and legendaries and stuff, but that's a number to try and aim for. As you can see with this team, you can achieve it with a fairly budget team, and then anything else, any legendaries you've got that are really powerful. Like, I will say, every single character that is doing most of the damage on my teams, these are all OP characters on this boss. Arasis, Percante. If you have a Skedius, that's like even better than Arasis. Jathalia, Vidimir. Here I'm using both Trollgar and Drist, who both do good AoE damage. And then on the last team, this is my worst team, just Karf. But there's other great characters that are of note that can bring in the damage, and I guess I'll go over those real quick if you guys have some of these characters. So basically, any character who does a full screen AoE that, you know, hits really hard will be good. So, you know, Garrica can be good. Ascetius is amazing. He's probably the best character in the entire game for doing damage to this boss. It's insane. Lothair, because every poison you get applied, every debuff you get applied from on the minions also gets applied on the boss. It's very easy. Actually, it's pretty much always going to happen. It's very easy to apply 40 poisons onto the boss. So for me, whenever my Durango ults, it's always 40 poisons on the boss. And if anyone knows how Lothair or Jathalia or even Vacania work, the more poisons, the better. The more damage you're going to get out of them. So 40 poisons on the boss every time is going to make Lothair hit really hard. Also Jathalia and Vacania, these are all going to be great as long as you pair them with someone who applies a bunch of poisons like Durango or Twitch, or maybe you have Dench or, you know, someone else. And then I guess let's look at the other good AoE characters. Let's see here. We've got, the single target Dauntless guys are not going to do as well. You've got, Percante I've already mentioned. You've got a lot of the rally guys are really, really good. You've got, Thelendor is going to be amazing. Huberg's amazing. Filto, amazing. Didn't mean to click that. You've got, in the Frost, you've got Havitar, obviously. She's incredible. Oster can do great damage. His ult's AoE. Trollgar, I already mentioned. He's, I'm using him. He's great. Losenia can probably do a good amount. You've got Drist, which I'm using. You've got, I think most of these necrotic guys, I think Sharlax's AoE, Ripicus, he brings a lot of debuffs. Although he doesn't bring that much damage, the debuffs he brings makes him really valuable. Lowanis, damage is insane. She's one of those top tier, AoE nukers as well. Premsa, Gulen, these are some of the very, very best. And then out of the epics, you've got some really good ones like Arasis is very powerful. You've got in Poison, you've got Sigrid. Sigrid is really good. If you have debuffs on all the targets, you can hit all the minions and the boss all at the same time. So she's going to be great. I guess she's not here because she's a rare, but I'm looking through the epics. Let's see. Is there anyone of note? I guess Horus could be all right. In the lightning, there's no one too crazy here that does insane damage. Rally actually has some good ones. Hegio and Welby are both going to be great. Welby's a rare. They do good AoE damage. In the epics, you've got like Rowena, you've got Dork that does AoE damage mainly. You've got in the rares, I guess Usha if you had her. Zarloth and Varesh do okay damage, but they're mainly going to be used for the healing that they bring. I wouldn't be building them as your like main nuker, main DPS. They probably can't do 200 million or anything like that. But yeah, those are some of the notable characters. Like I said, Sigrid, Eli's also very good. His ult's AoE and hits all the minions. And yeah, Irena's going to be good because her battle skills AoE and so is her ult. So she's going to be great. And yeah, those are some of the notable characters that are going to be your main DPS on the boss. But yeah, the goal is 200 million. Basically funnel all your damage into that 10-second window when the minions are up and just blast them to hell. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope it helps you guys get better scores on the boss, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. All right, guys, peace.